Bailey waited in a concrete cage for 10 years and nobody came. His eyes went cloudy. His legs stopped working. The other dogs got adopted, the puppies, the purebreds, the ones who still believed humans kept promises. While he pressed his gray muzzle against the bars and waited for a woman who'd driven away while he screamed her name. Margaret heard him that day, heard his paws scraping the kennel floor, heard the sound he made, not a bark, but something human and breaking. And she got in her car and drove anyway. Because the landlord said, the dog or the lease. And her dying husband needed insurance more than her dog needed her. So she chose. And for 10 years, she lived with what that choice sounded like. Then, at 3 a.m. on an October night, her phone rang. A stranger's voice shaking. "Ma'am, I'm calling about a dog you surrendered a decade ago. His name is Bailey. He's still here. And I think he's been waiting for you." Margaret collapsed. Because some guilts don't fade. They just wait in the dark until God decides you've suffered enough to be forgiven. This is what happened when a 73-year-old woman drove 17 miles through a storm to face the soul she'd destroyed. This is what a dog who refused to stop loving looks like after 3,650 days of abandonment. Don't look away, because what happens next is the kind of redemption that only the abandoned understand. And it will wreck you. Margaret hadn't spoken her own name out loud in 3 months. The house knew, walls remember voices, and these had gone silent the day Henry's last breath rattled out at 4:47 a.m. She'd counted the seconds between his exhales, watched them stretch longer, until there was only silence. Now she sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around cold coffee, staring at his empty chair. The loneliness had burrowed inside her chest and started eating her alive from the inside out. Yesterday, her daughter's voice tight with obligation. "Mom, it's time. Assisted living. You can't keep living alone." Alone. The word landed like a slap. Margaret whispered, "I'm fine," through tears. But fine was a lie she'd been telling for 10 years. Ever since she made a choice that split her soul in half. The landlord's ultimatum still echoed. The dog goes, or you both go. Henry was dying. They needed the apartment. The insurance. So she'd chosen survival. She'd chosen wrong. That last morning at the shelter, Bailey had known. Dogs always know. He'd pressed his body against her legs, and when the shelter worker reached for his leash, his tail stopped wagging. Just froze midair like hope dying in real time. His brown eyes were asking a question her cowardice couldn't answer. What did I do wrong? Bailey's paws scraped concrete as they dragged him backward. Then the sound, not a bark but a cry primal and breaking. She'd made it to her car before vomiting in the parking lot. Never called. Never went back. Because facing what you've destroyed requires a courage she didn't have. But tonight, thunder split the October sky. "Bailey," she whispered into the darkness. Then louder. "Bailey, I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry." 10 years of buried guilt erupted. And for the first time since Henry died, she felt something other than numbness. She felt everything. 17 miles away, an old dog's body went rigid. Bailey's half-deaf ears rotated toward a sound the world couldn't explain. His arthritis screamed as he forced his broken body to stand and walk to the front of Kennel 47. He pressed his gray muzzle against the gate and did what he'd done for 3,650 days. He waited, because some souls recognize each other across distance, across time, and Bailey had never stopped being hers, even when she'd stopped being his. Bailey's world had collapsed into 12 square feet of concrete. 10 years. 3,650 mornings in this cage. 3,650 nights on a thin blanket that smelled like disinfectant and other dogs' fear. Young dogs arrived, got adopted, disappeared into happy endings that didn't include him. Golden retrievers. Puppies stumbling over their own paws. They'd stay a week, then leave with families who called them good boy and meant it. Bailey watched them go, wondering what they had that he'd lost. The volunteers renamed him Buddy in year 2, fresh start, they said. As if Margaret hadn't carved Bailey into his soul so deep that 10 years couldn't scratch it out. They brought treats, scratched his ears. "You're a good boy, Buddy. Someone will want you soon." But their eyes told the truth. They saw his clouded vision, trembling leg, gray muzzle, and knew. Old plus broken equals invisible. His body betrayed him in pieces. Arthritis seized his joints. Mornings when standing felt like bones grinding into gravel. His eyes failed, the world bleeding into shadows. His back leg gave out some days, collapsing mid-step. The shelter director whispered to Sarah, "He's suffering. Maybe it's time." Time. The word humans used when they meant killing. But Bailey's heart, stupid, faithful, unbreakable, refused to quit. Every time the shelter door opened, his tail lifted. Just a tremor. Just a half-inch of maybe. The volunteers didn't understand why he never played, never performed tricks that got dogs adopted. They didn't know he was already spoken for. That waiting wasn't giving up. It was the only form of love he had left. Tonight, the October storm rattled the windows, and something shifted in Bailey's chest. Not hope. He'd buried hope because hope hurt worse than grief. This was recognition, like the air before lightning strikes. He stood, legs shaking, and walked to his gate. Deliberate. Purposeful. He pressed his nose against the cold metal, closed his cloudy eyes, and felt it. 17 miles away, someone had spoken his real name. Not Buddy. Bailey. Some bonds don't break when you're abandoned. They just stretch and wait for the universe to snap them back together. Sarah had one rule at Riverside Animal Shelter. Don't get attached. But Kennel 47 shattered it. The dog they called Buddy, his intake papers said Bailey, destroyed her every night shift. While other dogs barked and performed, Bailey just existed. A ghost waiting for someone who was never coming. Except tonight, he stood at his gate, body rigid, staring at the entrance like he could see through walls, through time. Sarah knelt beside his kennel. What is it, boy? Bailey didn't acknowledge her. His focus was absolute. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through the database. 10 years ago. Owner, Margaret Chin. Reason, housing situation. A phone number that probably didn't work. What if Margaret Chin still cared? What if some mistakes could be unmade? She dialed. 1 ring. 2 rings. Bailey's tail gave a single, trembling wag. 3 rings. Then a voice, elderly, exhausted. Hello. Is this Margaret Chin? Silence. Then, yes. Ma'am, I'm calling from Riverside Animal Shelter. 10 years ago, you surrendered a dog named Bailey. The silence stretched. He's still here, ma'am. After all this time, he's still here. And I think he's been waiting for you. The sound that came through wasn't crying. It was primal. A decade of guilt erupting. Oh God. Is he alive? He's alive, Sarah whispered. 17 miles away, and he's alive. Bailey's tail wagged again. This time it didn't stop. Margaret's hands shook as she grabbed her coat. The same coat from 10 years ago, still carrying his ghost smell. 3 a.m. Storm raging. Sarah offered to bring Bailey, but Margaret said no. Some apologies required you to walk through fire. She hadn't driven in months, but she didn't care. She started Henry's old truck. 17 miles in darkness and rain. Every mile felt like penance. Her mind circled back. Bailey's confused eyes, his paws scraping concrete. The sound when she walked away. She'd told herself he'd forget her, find a new family. But mercy was just the lie cowards told themselves. The truck's headlights cut through storm, illuminating the shelter sign. Margaret sat in the parking lot and almost turned around. What if he hated her? What if 10 years had turned love into resentment? What if she'd killed the best part of him? But then she remembered. The way he slept with his head on her feet. How he'd whimper in dreams until she whispered his name. The morning Henry collapsed and Bailey ran 3 blocks to get help. He'd saved them once. Maybe she could save him now. Sarah met her at the door, eyes red. He knows you're here. I don't know how, but he knows. They walked through rows of kennels, then Sarah stopped at Kennel 47. Bailey. Gray muzzle. Clouded eyes. Body trembling. But standing. Pressed against the gate. Staring at her like he'd never stopped seeing her. Even through a decade of abandonment. Margaret's knees buckled. She fell to the concrete, hands reaching through bars. Bailey. Oh God, Bailey, I'm so sorry. And Bailey, faithful, impossible, unbroken Bailey, pressed his nose into her palm and whimpered. The sound a soul makes when it finally comes home. Sarah opened the gate, and time collapsed. Margaret crawled inside and wrapped her arms around the dog who'd waited through 3,650 sunrises. Bailey's body melted into hers, his muzzle buried in her neck. The sound he made was pure forgiveness. His tail wagged so hard his entire back end shook. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. Not one day. Bailey licked her face, her tears, her cheeks, frantic, tasting the truth in her grief. Margaret understood then. She hadn't saved him. He'd saved himself. He'd chosen to keep loving her even when she didn't deserve it. Sarah helped them to the truck. 2 broken souls held together by sheer will. The ride home was silent except for Bailey's panting and Margaret's whispered apologies. She'd turned Henry's office into a bedroom for them both. She laid soft blankets on the floor, and Bailey collapsed onto them with a sigh that sounded like a decade of tension releasing. That first night, Margaret lay beside him, hand on his chest, feeling each breath. His cloudy eyes found hers in the darkness. And she saw it, not anger, just love. The same faithful, unconditional love he'd given her 10 years ago. She pressed her forehead to his. You were always mine. I was just too broken to believe I deserved you. Bailey's tail thumped once. Once was enough. They had 6 months together. 6 months of him sleeping with his head on her feet. Of her whispering his name until nightmares stopped. Of morning coffee with him pressed against her legs. Both grateful for warmth, for second chances, for love that refuses to die. When Bailey's breathing finally slowed for the last time, Margaret was holding him. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for teaching me that some loves are stronger than our worst mistakes. His last breath wasn't a rattle. It was a sigh. The contented sound of a soul finally, completely home. And Margaret, who'd spent 10 years drowning in loneliness, finally understood. She hadn't been alone. The most faithful love was just waiting 17 miles away, refusing to stop believing in her. Margaret had 6 months with Bailey before his heart gave out. 6 months of learning that forgiveness doesn't come from words. It comes from a tail that still wags, from eyes that choose to see you as worthy even when you're not. On the last morning, she held him while his breathing slowed. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for loving me when I didn't deserve it. His tail moved once, and then he was gone. But he didn't leave alone. He left knowing he was hers again. That's all he'd ever wanted. How many souls are waiting for you to come back? How many loves have you abandoned because the world made you choose between survival and loyalty? Bailey taught Margaret what we forget. Faithfulness isn't about never being hurt. It's about loving anyway, waiting anyway, believing that broken people and broken dogs can still find their way home if someone's brave enough to turn around. Maybe you're that person. Maybe there's a second chance waiting. One phone call away, 17 miles away, behind the guilt you've been carrying like a stone. What if today is the day you stop running? If this story cracked something open in you, if you felt Bailey's waiting in your own heart, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week, we bring you true stories of the abandoned who refused to stop loving, the broken who found healing, and the second chances that prove redemption is real. Because in the end, we're all just waiting for someone to come back and say our name like it still matters. Don't miss the next story. Someone's waiting for you to hear it.